Ready for our next candidate? I'd like to introduce Dr. Eric Chansberg. He's been a professor of economics at Indiana University in New Albany for 16 years. He's an active writer with 2 books on public policy, including Turn Neither to the Right nor the Left, A Thinking Christian's Guide to Politics and Public Policy. Dr. Chansberg is also an evangelical Christian who has taught Bible studies for 17 years. He's the author of a Bible study on the book of Joshua and is the co-author of a 21-month discipleship curriculum called Thoroughly Equipped. Turn it over to our panelists now.
Good evening. My question has to do with energy. What would you do to eliminate our need for foreign oil? And how would you support alternative clean forms of energy like nuclear, hydro, solar, and wind energy?
We're unlikely to end our dependence on foreign oil, but we ought to press to end our dependence on foreign oil provided by ornery countries. The best way to do that is to drill for the resources that we have. So I do avidly support that we would drill now, drill early, drill often. Beyond that, actually the number one problem with gas prices this summer was that the dollar had been devalued by 40% since 2002. And much of that is due to the big spending and debt of President Bush and his Democratic and Republican Congresses. So we don't have an energy crisis nearly as much as we have a dollar crisis, and we'll probably return to that question later. As for alternative energies, I'm fine with alternative energies, but they should not be subsidized. We should let the market reveal what those are. If you want a candidate who will take your money and give it to alternative energy companies, you can vote for Barron Hill. If you want a representative who will take your money and give to alternative energies and oil companies, you can vote for Mike Sodrell. If you want to vote for someone who will not take your money to give to any corporation, then I'm your candidate. We should leave it up to the market. The prizes are out there. Imagine if you're the next great innovation in energy conservation or whatever. There's tons of money on the table. And having the government step in there and try and pick winners, I just don't think it's either practical that the government will be good at that. They don't seem very good at that sort of thing. And I don't think it's equitable to take your money to give to any company ever.
Good evening. How are you?
Bill, thank you.
My question is kind of directed at maybe those who have been in office, and you have not been in office as of yet. Since you've not served in Congress, and I'm assuming have not received lobby money or PAC money, what's your stance on lobby money and how it affects the vote?
I think people get very excited about lobbying and PAC money, but for example, Barron has received $800,000 from the financial sector since he's been in. Mike has received $400,000. And I can understand why that makes people nervous, but I think it really misses the larger point, which is that people are spending a lot of money to get those seats in Congress because there's so much at stake in Congress. And why is that? Well, it's because the federal government is so big and it does so many things. And so as a libertarian and as someone who follows the Constitution, which is rare when it comes to Washington, D.C., I see a much smaller role for federal government. And if the federal government was much smaller, then the lobbying money and those sorts of things would dry up. People simply wouldn't spend all that money to devote to a seat that didn't control as much of our lives and our money as it does today. So I think the excitement about lobbying and campaign contributions really misses the larger issue, which is the role of government and the size and the scope of government. And I'm the only candidate that really feels seriously about reducing that scope dramatically, and I think that's what would dry up the concern that you've voiced.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is a 3-part question. What should the United States trade policy be? What's your view of trading with communist countries, China, Cuba, whatever? And do you support current U.S. trade agreements like NAFTA, or should they be changed?
Okay. Good evening, Kathy. One of the first things, I'm an economics professor, and one of the very first things we cover is the principle of voluntary mutually beneficial trade. And so it's my Econ 101 lessons will come in nicely here. I'm a huge fan of voluntary mutually beneficial trade. It's a beautiful thing ethically. You and I are engaged in trade. We both benefit. We're both coming to the trade voluntarily. So it's a beautiful thing in terms of ethics. It's a beautiful thing in terms of efficiency. Both of us gain from the trade. It helps the national wealth. It's not just that individuals are gaining, it's that the country as a whole is made more wealthy by those. Trade agreements are a different matter because trade agreements generally aren't exactly free trade. A lot of times they'll advance free trade, but they don't get there. I mean, the optimal free trade agreement to an economist would take about one sentence. So why it takes hundreds of pages to write these things is a bit of a mystery to me. So free trade, beautiful. Free trade agreements, probably a net advance, but a little squirrely. And then to your question about dealing with communist countries, it's voluntary mutually beneficial trade. So when it's not voluntary, as in dealing with a communist country, or an example, maybe some of the Chinese stuff is made with slave labor, then it's a different matter. And so restrictions on that sort of trade might be well to have in place because it is not voluntary trade. And so for ethical and efficiency reasons, you could see not trading with people like that.
My question now has to do with healthcare. Healthcare costs are at an increasing rate, and this makes it impossible for many deserving people to get the much needed care they require. How would you make healthcare insurance work for people and businesses, not just insurance and drug companies?
In an ideal world, there's no federal role for healthcare to begin with, so that kind of shuts down the whole discussion, I guess. Let's say that one believes that the government is really helpful. We've got a lot of government intervention now, but let's say that you believe that more government intervention is the way to fix that problem through nationalized health care or something like that. Why on earth would we risk a single federal, highly risky experiment on the healthcare industry by having the federal government, of all things, and they're doing a great job with a lot of things these days? Why would we give them the entire healthcare thing and say, hey, take your shot at this? I'd much rather, if you believe government's the solution here, let's take 50 different state-based experiments and take a shot at it. Massachusetts is trying something. Maybe some things go well, don't go well. Let's analyze that. Oregon, trying some things, goes well, doesn't go well. Instead of putting all our eggs in that basket for something that's so important, why on earth would we trust that to the federal government? It's hard to imagine why that's appropriate. Again, it's neither constitutional. I don't think it'd be effective. To the point of healthcare insurance, the funny thing is that healthcare insurance is too expensive because it covers too much. If you look at auto insurance, insurance typically covers rare catastrophic events. Healthcare insurance covers everything, and that should tell us there's something wrong with it. Imagine your auto insurance if it covered door dings, oil changes, and wiper blades, right? Suddenly oil changes would go to $100 a pop because you're only paying 10% of the bill. Suddenly there'd be tons of paperwork. Suddenly it would be portability because my auto insurance is tied to my employer. Well, I have pre-existing conditions because my car has these problems and maybe they don't want to insure me anymore. The problem is that we have health insurance that's far too comprehensive. We need to move to a system that's catastrophic in nature, and it would be far cheaper. It's a longer discussion than we can do in about 30 seconds. I'd encourage people to visit my website at ericforcongress.com, and I lay out the full description there.
Libertarians or constitutionalists? What change would you bring that doesn't already exist in the Constitution? Or maybe what changes would you make that would get us back to the